Welcome adventurers to another build video. Today we are going to build out a fighter and I'm going to need your help with this one. I have some very good ideas for level 1 into level 2 and beyond that I feel like the build struggles a bit. So let's dive in and see what we've got. For the ancestry, I am going to go with the Tengu. I like the Tengu, I think they're cool looking, and they have a lot of this mariner feel to them, a lot of seafaring flavor, and that is going to be the background of this character, so it works out really well. The background is going to be sailor. This is going to tie into the mechanics of what this character actually does in combat, and it's just a cool background. It's a good one for martials because you've got that strength or dexterity boost, and you're trained in athletics as if I needed that. Class, hey, I get to leave it as the default, which is fighter. Now, as far as the abilities go, this is where we need to kind of initially decide what type of a fighter we're going to be. And this build is going to focus on being a medium-ranged, high-damaged fighter. Now, ranges in Pathfinder can be tricky. If you are a front-line fighter, so in melee range, you're typically going to be using two-handed or maybe sword and board or maybe dual-wielding builds, and those attacks will add your full strength modifier to them, so you'll typically do a lot of damage, but you're in the front line, so you're going to take a lot of damage. In the back line, it's sort of the opposite. Bows and guns and crossbows and even cantrips, they don't do a ton of damage, but you are in the background, so you're not taking a lot of damage either. I'm going to kind of try to bridge the gap here by going with thrown weapons. Why thrown weapons? Because, well, they have a range to them, but unlike other ranged weapons, you do get to add your full strength modifier to your damage. And there's a fighter feat I'm going to pick up that will add a little bit more damage to that thrown weapon build as well. In the background, I'm kind of imagining this as being like, well, you're a sailor, you are harpooning things, and you get really good at it, so that's what you do in combat. All that being said, this means that we are going to boost strength and dexterity as often as we can, though dexterity will be our key ability score because we want that maximum accuracy with our thrown weapon. We want some constitution to be survivable and wisdom because I think that kind of makes sense for being a seafaring adventurer. You don't have to be charismatic. If anything, I see this as being a pretty gruff character, and intelligence is good for skill training, but let's face it, you're not playing a fighter, so you can be good at skills. All right, now as far as the heritage goes, we're going to go with the Storm-Tossed Tengu. This allows us to ignore some concealment effects, and it gives us electricity resistance, and it just makes sense with the background of the character. For the Ancestry feat, Uncanny Agility, you gain the Steady Balance skill feat. You can step into difficult terrain caused by uneven ground, such as a rocky field or hilly incline. I see this character as being someone who has great mobility. They used to be on a ship, which is very unsteady surface, and they are just good at navigating around. And then as far as the class feat goes, this is where we are going to get a bit of a benefit as a ranged fighter using point-blank shots. You take aim, pick off enemies nearby. When using a ranged weapon, volley weapon, we're ignoring that. We're not going to be using a volley weapon. When using a ranged weapon that doesn't have the volley trait, which is what we will be using, you gain a +2 circumstance bonus to damage rolls on attacks against targets within the weapon's first range increment. So, which weapon are we going to use? We are going to use some javelins. Lots of javelins, actually, because they are inexpensive, and I feel like we should just kind of stock up on them. So go ahead and buy yourself, I'm not going to go through it now, but get yourself a quiver, 4, maybe 5 javelins. Now, the damage you will be able to do with a javelin First of all, let's remind ourselves that it is a thrown weapon with a range of 30 feet, which is pretty good. You could also use spears, I suppose. That would bring your range a little bit closer, but then you would have something that you can use in combat. I believe it is also a D6 in thrown, so that's another option. But you're going to do that D6 plus 3 from your strength because it is a thrown weapon, then another 2 from point blank shot, assuming you get into the point blank shot stance. That means you will do D6 plus 5 on your ranged attacks, which is really good. If you compare that to something like a short bow, the short bow does D6. A crossbow does D8. Even if you're using a composite weapon, which will add half your strength modifier, well, your strength modifier is half rounded down, so that would be like a composite short bow would be like a D6 plus 1. So D6 plus 5 is really good. True, you're not getting a deadly D8 or D10 or whatever it is on the short bow, and you're not getting the like fatal D12 that a firearm might have, but I think this is going to do very good, consistent damage. Now, to round out the build at level 1, you can go with simple leather armor here because you have such a good dexterity score. So you do that, and you are maxed out. You can also, I think it's not a bad idea to go ahead and get yourself a shield. You do have shield block, and if you were going to be defensive, which is sort of the point of being ranged, is not taking damage, then having a shield and using it is a good idea. As far as other weapons, I mean, I do think that using a sword, like a short sword, as your backup would make a lot of sense. It is finesse, so that means that you will have your full attack bonus with this. And it is also versatile slashing, so that's good if you run into something that is not going to take much piercing damage. Well, forget about trying to hit it at range with piercing weapons. Run in, use your slashing short sword. And then, I mean, you grab an adventures pack, you round out your training, get some acrobatics. This is more acrobatic than athletic kind of a build anyway. You've got your sailing lore. I think giving this character just a little bit of medicine. I mean, you don't have a high wisdom score, but you can boost that later. And I see this as being sort of a, hey, you're the emergency medic on a ship. I think survival would be really, really good. Fits the background. It's difficult to live out on sea, so you're trained in survival. And then maybe stealth. Oh, we've already got those trained. Well, Foundry's not doing a good job at giving me my last ability to train, so let me untrain myself in acrobatics there. There we go. So I can give myself training in, I was going to say, either stealth or thievery. Let's go with thievery. You stole some rations while on the ship, perhaps. So that's it for level 1. The focus of this character is doing a lot of damage at range while still having the ability to get up close if you need. Again, that thrown weapon that will add your +3 strength and then the +2 from point blank shot is going to be really good steady damage. You will have to pull out new weapons to throw, so you kind of have a reload option, but you could also carry 2 into combat and at least have 2 strikes before having to reload. Now, at level 2, I have one idea for this character, and then I kind of run into trouble. We're going to go with Rebounding Toss. So you are wielding a thrown weapon. That's us. You bounce your weapon off one foe to strike another, make a ranged strike with a thrown weapon. If this strike hits, the weapon rebounds toward an enemy within 10 feet of the original target. Make an additional strike against this target. Both of these strikes count toward the multiple attack penalty, but the penalty doesn't increase until you have made both attacks. So this is super cool. Not only do you get to make 2 strikes without incurring the map penalty, at least until afterwards, but you also don't have to reload here. So it is 2 actions rather than what would potentially be 3, like throw, draw another javelin, and throw. You get to just throw, and it goes bing, bing, and it hits 2. And not gonna lie, I'm out of ideas after this. I think this is such a cool build at levels 1 and 2, but I have trouble finding class feats that really excite me for this build past that. So if you know of any, let us know about it in the comments. The other thing that I sort of have trouble with is what to do with your weapons as you level up. Typically, as a martial, at level 2, maybe level 3, you're going to get a +1 rune that will add, well, 1 to your attack rolls. And this, I think, costs 35 gold pieces, if I remember, so kind of depends on how you're doing with loot, but it's a level 2, level 3 item. And you usually put that on your primary weapon. Well, if you have a quiver full of javelins, you're going to only be able to afford to put it on one, and then you throw that one, which leads you to, you get a returning rune, which you can buy a little bit later on. And that's really cool. So your javelin doesn't go away, and you get that +1 bonus from the +1 rune. But now you don't have a striking rune. That is something that martials typically also do, is they get that +1 rune to begin, and then they add a striking rune afterwards, which will let you add a damage die. So at level 3 or 4, the other fighter or barbarian might be doing a +1 on their attacks and then have like a 2d12 weapon. That's pretty big damage. You'll have that +1 on your attacks and that javelin will come back to you, but you'll still be doing just a d6. And I find that problematic. And then even if you did, let's say, get a +1 rune and then decide, hey, I'm going to go ahead and put a striking rune on this, well, then what happens if you miss or you throw that and, well, you don't have it back and now you're back to just regular old javelins? It feels very difficult to scale up for me. I think it's great at the super early levels, but it really kind of fizzles out after that. So if you have ideas of how to address that, if you've done that with other, especially thrown weapon builds, let me know about it. I think it's such a cool idea. I want it to work. I'm just not so sure it's going to work past level 2, certainly not to like level 3 or 4. So, oh well if that's the case, but if you have ideas, let's hear about it. I hope to hear from you. Until then, I guess just keep trying to make these funky builds work, adventurers. Talk to you next time.